Welcome back, friends and pals, to a brand new series of Into the Breach Unfair Difficulty Guide. This time we're going to be playing with the Hazardous Mechs. They are a very interesting little squad. They are considered to have a high skill ceiling. If you're unfamiliar with that term, what that means is this squad requires a certain higher level of skill or competency in order to kind of get them functioning. They're a very particular little Rube Goldberg machine. So we have the Unstable Mech and the Leap Mech, both of which they have powerful weapons that inflict damage when they are used. And then the NANOMACH has a passive where when you kill an enemy, you heal 1 HP. The NANOMACH also has a projectile weapon that applies acid. So this squad has pretty strong forced movement ability, decent mobility, and pretty solid damage output. Its downsides are the fact that it is doing constant self-damage to itself. This requires, very careful surveying of the islands. Now, I'm going to pick Archive as my first island because it has Leapers. They are low HP enemies, and we really need to have low HP enemies at the beginning to ensure that we are getting consistent heals. The downside is we have the Spider Leader. So it's going to be a really tough fight, but I'm hoping that if I can at least survive and get it out of the way, then the rest of the run will maybe have a chance. I don't love the options available to me here at the beginning, but the mission with the mines, almost all of those mines were on the player side of the board, and it looked like they were going to be constraining my mobility a great deal. So I go with defend the satellite launches. It looked like, the fact that these satellites are on opposite ends of the map from each other, perhaps I will not have to be too concerned with them getting harassed. Now, you have to be careful with the the Hazardous Mechs, because both the Leap Mech and the Unstable Mech are prone to collateral damage. The Leap Mech has an omnidirectional attack that is non-discriminatory, very similar to the Siege Mech from the Steel Judoka, but with no option to make the grid immune. And then the Unstable Mech moves backwards from recoil when it fires its cannon. So if it's, next to the grid and fires, it can damage the grid from bump damage, essentially. So we've got a pair of Leapers, a Mosquito, and a Gastropod to deal with. And the Scion for this island is the Raging Scion, so everyone's doing +1 damage, which is potentially bad, especially because we're going to be doing self-damage. But you can see the power of the Leap Mech here. Especially if you have bump damage to work with. It is capable of a lot of destruction. It has more trouble getting kills, though, than the Unstable Mech, because it starts off just doing 1 damage. But as you can see, even though I inflicted some self-damage, we've repaired a decent amount of it thanks to Nano Filter, or the NANOMACHINES passive. I just body block the satellite with the Unstable Mech there. So unless it can land a kill shot, it is going to die. Just disconcerting. However, similar to the Charge Mech from the Zenith Guard, the Unstable Mech is one of the few brute class mechs that starts doing 2 damage. The price it pays for this is, the fact that it does self-damage and moves itself backwards with recoil. So we can see, using bump damage, the satellite can survive taking 1 damage, and I can kill that Gastropod. And then you can see that even when the mech is destroyed, the self-repair will kick in, as long as you got a death blow. So using this knowledge, you can keep your mechs alive. It just takes very deliberate, very careful action with the Unstable Mechs. The NANOMACH being the only one that doesn't do damage to itself, it's kind of the kind of go-between. It has a one-directional push attack, which is very handy. It can fly, so it can kind of get in and out of tough positions. It is sort of the I don't know. I consider it almost the leader of this squad. And the fact that it also applies acid is very important. It lets the other two get more consistent kills. Acid doubles weapon damage. So on this turn, I was actually fortunate that the Vec were not attacking the grid or attacking the satellites. So I can use this turn to kind of just reposition and prepare myself for the final round. You know, we can get a couple spawn blocks in using the nanomech to push that gastropod. So this mission went relatively smoothly, all things considered. I'm going to try and keep that that string going as long as I can. I have not gotten a perfect 40k run with the Hazardous Mechs, nor will I with this particular run. Spoiler alert. They're difficult, you know, they're prone to collateral damage. It can be tough to keep your pilots alive. As far as pilots that are synergistic with this squad, you're looking for pilots that can reduce the self-damage, such as Abe. His armored trait is very handy. If you're very careful, Mafan can be a good choice. Also, pilots that provide some other form of support, like Rosy Rivets, can be useful. Rosie can, you know, provide some extra healing. So it's our final round here, and we've got a little bit of a Jenga puzzle to play. We have to do something about both of these gastropods. But what I can do is that one gastropod covered in acid can be destroyed, and then we can set the other one up to be destroyed for a clean shot with the unstable mech, and we're in the clear. So, you know, this first mission is a decent showcase of the little Rube Goldberg machine you have to set up for this squad. If you're careless or you're unfamiliar with their gimmick, it's very easy to wind up with just dead pilots and disabled mechs. And you have to be very careful about that, because if you lose a mech, you know, early in a mission, then you're just permanently down on action advantage. So I have 3 choices for a mission now. I really don't like the idea of trying to defend a train. So I'm going to go for the Tidal Waves mission. This is usually pretty safe, pretty player-sided. You know, it's short, and we have the environment helping us get rid of the enemy. As far as positioning strategy goes for the Hazardous Mechs, you want to treat the Leap mech more as if it's a ranged class mech, less of a prime. You know, its attack, it goes over cover, it does an omnidirectional push and damage. It's very similar to most artillery-style weapons. It's just that it is using its own body as the projectile. The unstable mech, obviously, you have to kind of treat it as typical, slower, brute class mechs. And you also have to kind of accommodate for the fact that it will be pushing itself around as it fires. And that kind of leaves the nanomech as your, as I said before, kind of go-between. This is a good example of leap mech utility here, and why I like to pick the island with leapers as my first one, because the leap mech can kill non-alpha leapers with one shot. Another decent choice for the first island for the Hazardous Mechs is Pinnacle, as you will have the robot enemies, which have 1 HP. However, based on what I saw on the other islands for this run, you know, it was going to be tough. There's going to be no free breakfast on this run. You know, this is not the worst op4 to start with, but I'm going to have to get through that spider leader. So I was really not sure if this was going to be the run. And after my somewhat anticlimactic playthrough with the Frozen Titans, I was keen to get another win in, if not for educational purposes, then for my own fragile ego. But as you can see, this mission is going pretty smoothly. There's a little trick that you just saw there. If the nanomech has a free action, you can just shoot, and you can shoot directly on a Vec spawn tile, then the emerging Vec will get covered in acid right away. So it looks like we are basically in the clear here. Nothing important is being targeted. You know, the mosquito will hit that shielded building tile, so we are in good shape. The unstable mech is out of position to get anything really accomplished. But so far, so good. 2 perfect missions. We'll see if I can keep that up. My next choice for missions is to knock mites off the mechs with air support. Now, on paper, this is a pretty favorable mission for us. Doing self-damage, it is quite easy to get rid of Vec mites. The bad side is this particular map seed is a nasty one. I routinely have trouble on this one. You're very constrained with your positioning and movement. And for a squad like the Hazardous Mechs, this can lead to some dicey scenarios. So I was not loving this map seed, but I was hoping that the archive bombers would, lend me some assistance. But that is a little bit RNG dependent, and we will see if my luck will hold. I position the Leap Mech and the Nanomech to hopefully let them kind of handle the western majority side of the board, with the unstable mech being the one for that kind of corridor on row C. I'm also sweating it a little bit because the time pod has dropped, and it is slightly unlikely since the bombers will never target the grid, but there is a small chance that the bomber might blow up the time pod. We don't want that to happen. So this is an interesting turn. It's basically a free turn. Nothing is directly threatening the grid. So I have to try and take advantage of this to set myself up, to be in as much of an advantageous position as I can. So basically I can use this opportunity to start clearing the mites off and get a little bit of start killing off some of the enemy. And I consider repositioning the unstable mech, but I think I decide against it because someone's going to have to go and get that time pod, and potentially that could be the unstable mech. So, mission accomplished as far as the mites are concerned. Ralph gets their first level up. I think I check Ralph. Or maybe I don't check Ralph. I thought I did that right away. So I'm going to grab that time pod for safekeeping, do some repositioning, and I think just block a spare spawn with the Leap Mech. If I'm not mistaken, I think Ralph's level up skill he got was Invulnerable, which is very interesting. Normally that's kind of a nothing burger skill, especially if you're already playing, well enough that you don't routinely lose pilots. But it is actually somewhat useful skill for the Hazardous Mechs. It means I can afford to be a little bit more sloppy, particularly on the last turn. If on that last turn Ralph has to bite it, it doesn't actually cost me anything. He will survive. So I don't like this penultimate turn here. We've got a lot of Vec on the field now. We mopped up a decent amount of them in those first couple turns. Two of them can be dealt with by the Leap Mech, essentially. Yes, the one mosquito will burn to death on its own. Now, the downside here is, I really wanted to protect that grid building, but I'm taking a big risk here, and that is that even though that one mosquito will die, I didn't actually get any kill shots, so I didn't get any self-healing in. So Ralph's going to burn to death. Now, he's not dead. He's invulnerable. But I am now down a mech action. I was really banking on the bombers to help me out here. I'm fortunate that, the Leaper's killed, so I'm down to a 3v2. Unfortunately, the Leaper is replaced immediately by another, and I get some real bad luck here. The Bomber is of no help to us, and I have no ability to do anything about the Leaper. The Leap Mech's corpse is blocking the way, so I can't push it out of the way. So I am going to lose 2 grid health. There's nothing I can really do about it. Bummer. The one upside is the, 2 damage we take to the grid will be immediately repaired from our successful mission. And Ralph is still with us. But still, it was, a risky play, and it didn't work out for me. I get a reactor core and no other toys, but, that's fine. For your first core, it can be very tempting to put it into the +1 damage each upgrade on the unstable cannon or the hydraulic legs, but I would heavily suggest not doing that. If you're struggling keeping your mechs alive, I would recommend maybe putting your first core into HP, either for the leap mech or the unstable mech. I picked the speed upgrade for the unstable mech. I find that just upping its mobility really helps extend its options. So I have to pick my final mission now before the boss fight, and I'm not in love with any of the options available here. I think I go with defend the tanks. It's risky, but I thought it was maybe a little bit less risky than the other options available. This is not a great map seed. We have tight corridors, and the tanks are just sitting right in the middle there. But, my other options is to take less than 4 mech damage, and those mines just are not in a good position. It's going to limit my mobility. Didn't love it. There was defend the train, and one other choice that was just not looking good. So, at this juncture, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to probably not be getting a perfect island here. On the one hand, it's kind of a bummer. We'll be, behind a little bit on upgrades. But on the other, it could be potentially slightly freeing. I know I'm going to be looking down the barrel of the Spider Leader, and that's going to be a nasty fight. But, if I'm already not going to be getting a perfect island reward, then I don't have to worry too much about killing the Spider Leader. I can just try to focus as much as I can on damage control. We'll see how this strategy pays off for me shortly. I'm trying to position my mechs so that I can respond to threats to the grid or the tanks, but I have, very restricted mobility options here. Both for the Leap Mech's attack and the Unstable Mech's recoil. So I'm going to see how things shake out. And we are not very lucky here. We've got 1 threat to the grid, and then 2 threats to a tank. So this is going to be a tough turn. It takes me a while to figure out a solve that I was even happy with. And I think, if memory serves, I do wind up using my temporal reset, and it still doesn't really solve the problems I had. The first misplay I do, and this would have probably saved me my temporal reset, is that I try to, I think, push the Alpha Leaper first, and that would be the mistake. You can see that the the unstable mech has pretty limited ability to respond to things right now. It can only really fire on the row 5 and the column C, like, firing corridors. Otherwise, it's going to be damaging itself. And then, yeah, that was the misplay, because I do this. And the misplay is, like, I'm happy to do damage to that leaper. If there was nothing I could do to save that tank, it's kind of a moot point. I think, though, what I would rather have had happen is the leaper block the Vex spawn for me. And that is why I'm going to be using my temporal reset. Hindsight being 2020, maybe I shouldn't have used it. Maybe I should have just accepted. Ah, I see. So the Alpha Leaper does go before the Gastropod in initiative. So it would destroy the tank, and then the Gastropod would destroy the other tank. So I used the reset to salvage, half of the rep for this mission. If I can keep at least one of the tanks alive, I will also get an extra friendly on the last 2 turns to, help me with action advantage. So I use my temporal reset. Kind of a bummer. But then, I execute my otherwise, the plan I had. If it was not for the limitations of the unstable mech, I could have killed the Gastropod. But, I could not kill the Gastropod without also bump damaging the tank. And also, the unstable mech would then be killed by the Alpha Leaper. And so then I'd be down a pilot and down an action advantage for the rest of the mission. So I decide against that. I think I just elect to mop up some of the other opposition on the field. And then our pilot levels up and also gets invulnerable. Again, kind of weird, but I'll take that. Both of my mechs that have the self-damaging weapons now have invulnerable pilots, so that kind of affords me a little bit of wiggle room to make mistakes. But rest in peace, Archive Tank 1. There was nothing really I could do to save it, and that was a risk I knew I was going to be taking as soon as I picked this mission. So no perfect island reward for me. We've got a 3v3 this turn, but it's going to be quickly ballooning into a 6v3 unless I can start cleaning up some of the enemy ranks here. We can fortunately ignore the Alpha Gastropod. This setup is nice in that it lets me get ready to do some spawn blocking. So our penultimate turn will be a functional 2v4 our favor, as the tank will come online. The problem with this turn is that new Alpha Leaper that just popped out. I lack the ability to kill it in a reasonable time frame. And if the nanomech just stays where it is to push the Leaper away, then the nanomech will die from blocking the Vex spawn. It's always a risk you take when you're putting a 2 HP mech on top of a Vex spawn tile. The unstable mech obviously is not in a way, doesn't have the speed or maneuverability to put itself into a more advantageous position. So the thing I'm not happy about this turn is that I have to, I basically can't block as many spawns as I want to. And I don't get, I think I'm only going to get one Vec kill in. So my final turn will be a functional 4v4. A relatively neutral action advantage / disadvantage situation, all things considered. So we will see what our final turn gives us here. A pair of mosquitoes and a gastropod. So we can get a clean solve, at least. So, at least we didn't take any grid damage. You know, we've just forfeited our perfect island reward, but not necessarily the end of the world. However, speaking of the end of the world, we have a fight against the Spider Leader. In some of my past videos in this series, I've actually somewhat clowned on the Spider Leader a couple of times. This will be a good showcase as to why the Spider Leader can be, you know, the problem that I often say it is. It is worthy of its reputation. It's especially irritating to face the Spider Leader when you have other web-capable, you know, producing Vec to restrain your mobility. They've got a pair of leapers, a gastropod, and then the spider themselves. It'll be producing between, I think, 2 and 3 spiderlings every turn. Part of the reason that I thought, you know, I felt somewhat more confident picking this as my first island is that the leap mech is pretty good at killing spiderlings. You know, it's got its big omnidirectional 1 damage attack. And the spiderlings are vulnerable to, you know, any amount of damage and also vulnerable to push damage. So right off the bat, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 5 threats to the grid, one of which to the ever-important corporate tower mission objective building. The Leaper and Spiderling on the western side of the board look like a prime target for the Leap Mech's attack. But I'm going to lack the actions to handle all of the threats. At least we're keeping the Spiderling population somewhat in control. But there's nothing I can really do about taking a 1 damage attack, either from the gastropod or that Spiderling. So I'm going to have to make up my mind. I do consider maybe letting both of them get their attacks through and inflicting acid on the Spider Leader to try and kind of set them up to be destroyed. But since I already know I'm not getting my perfect island reward, you know, my grid health is very precious. As much of it as I can save as possible, I think is the best move. So we're already down a grid health. Kind of nasty. And we are maintaining a 5v3 enemy action advantage. That's just kind of, you know, the price you gotta pay when you're facing multiple spiderlings. So we, this time, only have 3 threats to the grid. And we were somewhat fortunate in that the gastropod will destroy an egg for us. But as you can see, I have to waste a lot of effort and a lot of time just kind of mopping up spiderlings. So I'm unable to get, any damage started really on the spider leader themselves. And, we're doing our best to keep the population under control, but we're already looking at a 6v3 this turn. Turns out to be more of a functional 5v3 since it's the Raging Scion emerging. But this is a problem, The Spiderlings are not affected. Fortunately, they are still just doing 1 damage. But all the other Vec on the field are benefiting. And then once again, we get a little bit of weird little stroke of luck where the eggs are blocking gastropod attacks for us. Unfortunately, the leap mech now is out of position, and I can't get a good angle on the spiderlings and the mosquitoes over on the western side of the map. They're the ones threatening that grid tile on C4. The unstable mech is just kind of in a bad position. So yeah, it's going to be, I'm not going to be happy with this particular turn. I think I cannot stop. Yeah, I consider attacking the spider leader, but it's definitely not worth losing a grid health over. And I just don't think I'm going to be able to do enough damage in the 2 turns remaining to finish it off. So yeah, all the leap mech can really do is try to just get back into, back to the center of the board, get it into a better position, and I'm giving up yet again 1 grid health. The only consolation being that I'll be down to a 4v3 enemy action advantage on the final turn. So yeah, pretty rough. We've lost 2 grid health so far. And we've had to functionally forfeit 2 reputation and my perfect island reward. So we do slightly luck out, though, in that we only have 2 threats to the grid, which we can address. And then, unfortunately, the leap mech has nothing really of use. It can't really contribute anything. I think out of spite, I can just do a little bit of damage to the spider leader. Just to send it on its way, smarting ever so slightly. So that will wrap up our first island with the Hazardous Mechs. It was a bitter struggle. But let's see what the reputation store has for us. And wouldn't you know, the run just got very interesting. Self-destruct. Usually a meme tier weapon, it actually has use with the Hazardous Mechs. Because you can still self-repair even if you're destroyed. So I buy the big red button, a single power core and, a little bit of grid health, and the run has just gotten very interesting. I'm excited to show you this bizarre synergy. Thanks for joining me, and we'll have more stuff for you in the near future. We'll see if we can thread the needle and salvage this run with this strange, yet highly damaging squad on Into the Breach.